All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are taking a completely data-driven look at which home renovations actually pay off. We're going to cut right through all those emotional decisions and beautiful Pinterest boards to give you the hard, unvarnished 2026 numbers. Every single year, homeowners waste literal billions of dollars by renovating based entirely on emotion and aesthetics, rather than looking at the actual data. If you own a home, you've probably asked yourself whether that upcoming project is actually a solid financial investment or just a very, very expensive treat. Well, today, we're equipping you with the absolute facts so you can make that crucial distinction. Let's get into it.
So let's dive right into the ultimate homeowner trap. It is this pervasive myth that every single dollar you spend on a renovation directly equals a dollar added to your home's resale value. And look, it is so completely understandable. It's incredibly easy to assume that if you painstakingly save up and write a massive check for a $75,000 kitchen remodel, your home is instantly worth 75 grand more. I mean, it just feels fair, right? But the data shows this is almost never the case. The market, not your thick stack of receipts and long weekends dealing with contractors, is what actually determines your home's value.
To make smarter financial choices, we have to immediately draw a hard line between personal value and market value. Personal value? Well, that's the joy you get from your specific choices. It's the custom cabinetry you obsessed over, that highly specific artisan tile backsplash, the high-end brass fixtures. But market value is strictly what a completely unknown future buyer is willing to pay. And here is the hard truth of real estate. A potential buyer walking into an open house might look at your brand new, highly personalized dream kitchen and think it's going to look terribly dated in 5 years. Or they might just absolutely hate your taste in countertops. They're simply not going to pay a premium for something they already plan to rip out.
All right, Section 1. Cost recouped versus profit.
Before we look at the top 12 projects for this year, we need to establish the proper financial vocabulary. We need to know exactly what a win actually looks like out there in the real estate market. The baseline metric we use is called cost recouped. This is simply the percentage of your initial spending that you get back when you eventually sell the home. Now, think about this. The 2026 national median for cost recouped across all major projects is just 67.8%. That means, on average, you typically only get back about 2/3 of what you spend. You are basically losing a third of your investment right out of the gate, and that's before you even factor in inflation or interest. So the absolutely crucial point here is that cost recouped is not the same thing as profit or return on investment. For a true positive ROI in home renovations, the value added to your home must fundamentally exceed the total project cost. And as we'll see as we dive deeper into the numbers, that scenario is actually incredibly rare. Most of the time, your goal with a renovation isn't to somehow make money, but to minimize the net cost of the improvement. You're essentially buying quality of life for yourself while trying to lose as little of that cash as possible when it comes time to hand the keys over to someone else. Moving on to Section 2, the surprising winners, where curb appeal is king. Let's look at the actual data drawn from Remodeling magazine's national reports. And honestly, it reveals that the most lucrative projects are completely unglamorous. I mean, exterior replacements absolutely crush those sexy interior remodels when it comes to maximizing resale value. Look at the top 3. They are all about the exterior. Garage door replacement, manufactured stone veneer, and a steel entry door replacement. These projects fundamentally improve a home's first impression, which has a massive outsized impact on appraisal value and buyer interest before they even step foot through the front door. Let's zoom in on the undisputed champion for a second. Replacing your garage door is a rare financial anomaly that actually turns a slight profit. Nationally, it costs a median of $4,310, but it adds $4,420 in resale value. That is a 102.6% recoup. Why does this work so well? Well, because a garage door often takes up 30% or more of your home's entire front facade. It practically dictates the entire street view for an appraiser and a prospective buyer. It's literally one of the only projects where you can actually make money just by doing it. Following those top 3, we have what I like to call the mid-tier performers. These are functional, cosmetic, and energy-efficient upgrades that perform solidly, bringing back between 65% and 82% of your investment. Notice that a minor kitchen remodel, basically a cosmetic refresh involving refacing cabinets and updating hardware rather than a full-blown structural gut, recovers nearly 82%. A little restraint really pays off here. Moving down, replacing old siding with durable fiber cement recovers over 80%, mainly because buyers absolutely love low maintenance. Upgrading to vinyl windows brings back 70% by promising lower energy bills, and adding a classic wood deck recoups 68% because it efficiently expands your livable space outdoors.
Finally, a mid-range bathroom remodel rounds out this tier at about 65.
Rounding out the top 12 are purely functional upgrades. We're talking about things like converting to an electric heat pump, adding attic insulation, a basement remodel, or replacing an aging asphalt shingle roof. Now, while these only recoup around 60%, they serve a completely vital purpose. They reassure buyers. By addressing basic maintenance, you drastically lower the buyer's perceived risk. Let's think about the psychology here for a second. Absolutely no one walks into an open house excited to buy a new HVAC system or a brand new roof. It's boring. But if a buyer sees an old, failing roof, they instantly panic and mentally subtract $20,000 from their offer, just to be safe. Replacing these functional items prevents those massive psychological discounts. Which brings us to Section 3, Understanding the 2026 Market.
We need to see how all this builds into the broader macroeconomic picture, because context is everything. And the 2026 market is fundamentally different from previous years. We are thankfully out of the extreme supply chain chaos and massive material price spikes we saw in the early 2020s. But in 2026, with mortgage rates stabilized between 5.5% and 6.5%, a massive lock-in effect is happening. Homeowners who secured those historically low 3% rates years ago, yeah, they are staying put. They're choosing to renovate their current spaces rather than brave a brand new mortgage. And because everyone is deciding to renovate at the exact same time, there is a huge demand for qualified local contractors, making it way harder and often way more expensive to get on their schedules. Additionally, government policies like the Federal Inflation Reduction Act tax credits are directly incentivizing homeowners to prioritize specific energy-efficient projects. When you factor in the thousands of dollars available in tax credits for things like heat pumps, insulation, and new windows, it completely shifts the cost-benefit math on those specific upgrades. It makes them so much more attractive than the raw recoup percentages initially suggest. For example, if an $8,000 heat pump normally only recoups 60% of its value, but you get a $2,000 tax credit right off the top, your real out-of-pocket return on investment completely transforms. Suddenly, that boring functional upgrade looks like an absolute financial masterstroke. All right. Let's look at Section 4, Budgeting and Contractor Secrets. Now that we have the national data and the market context, we really need to talk about the boots-on-the-ground reality of getting this work done without burning through all your cash. You absolutely must ground these national estimates in your local reality. A project hitting the national median will skyrocket if you live in a place like Los Angeles or New York. Out there, you're dealing with $75 to $95 hourly labor rates for skilled journeymen, intensely complex and slow permitting processes, and mandatory regional risks like really costly seismic retrofitting. National data is your essential baseline for sure, but your local zip code dictates the final check you are actually going to write. To protect yourself financially, you absolutely must follow this golden rule from the National Association of Home Builders. Separate 10 to 20% of your total budget into a dedicated contingency fund. And listen to me on this. This is not a fun little slush fund for picking out nicer tile or upgrading your appliances at the last minute. No way. This is your emergency safety net to handle severe, unforeseen disasters that only reveal themselves once the walls are actually opened up. I'm talking about hidden water damage, outdated electrical wiring, or plumbing that just isn't up to code. A $10,000 bathroom budget turns into $15,000 incredibly fast when mold is found hiding behind the drywall. And speaking of protecting yourself, before you write a single check, you should strictly structure your contractor meetings around 3 key questions. First, ask what is explicitly excluded from their quote. This one simple question uncovers hidden fees like debris hauling or final cleaning. Second, ask what the 3 most common unforeseen issues are for a project exactly like yours. This forces the contractor to anticipate budget risks based on their specific, real-world experience with similar homes. And third, ask exactly how change orders will be priced and approved. Well, that actually brings us right to our next critical point. When you ask about change orders, you want to hear a very specific guarantee from your contractor. You want them to say that any change you request will be documented in writing with a fixed price for both labor and materials, and that there are absolutely no verbal agreements on changes. Establishing this strict written process immediately protects both you and your budget from runaway costs. Change orders, those little "hey, while you're at it" requests, are the #1 reason projects go wildly over budget. So eliminating informal, verbal agreements keeps everyone honest and keeps your finances perfectly predictable.
Finally, Section 5, the Renology take, needs versus wants.
We've covered the myths, the national data, the market context, and the execution strategies. So let's synthesize what this all means for your next big project. It really all comes down to this one fundamental question. Are you renovating for the market, or are you renovating for yourself?
Remember, it is perfectly fine to renovate purely for your own quality of life. If you want that luxury kitchen to cook huge holiday meals with your family, do it. But budget for it with the sober, data-backed understanding that the market only fully repays curb appeal and basic maintenance. So as you plan your next home upgrade, ask yourself, which master are you serving, your own joy or your future buyer? Are you willing to sacrifice thousands in potential resale value just for that perfect artisanal backsplash? Or are you ready to treat your primary residence like the massive financial asset it actually is? The data is firmly in your hands now. How you use it will define your net worth for the next decade. Keep calculating, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.